There's a quiet kind of pain that good people carry, one that doesn't show up on their faces but lives in their hearts. It's the pain of always giving, always understanding, always forgiving, until there's nothing left to give. And even then, somehow, they still try. You can spot them easily. They're the ones who say, "It's okay, don't worry about it," when it isn't okay. The ones who pick up emotional messes they didn't make. The ones who try to fix people who never asked to be fixed. Good people don't fall apart loudly, they break quietly. One disappointment at a time, one unmet need after another. And by the time anyone notices, they've already built a whole personality around hiding the hurt. We tell ourselves that kindness is strength, that empathy makes us better humans. And that's true, but there's a side no one talks about. When kindness becomes your identity, it becomes the easiest way for the world to use you. Because when your worth depends on being needed, you'll let anyone need you, even if it drains you. When you're afraid of being seen as selfish, you'll keep saying yes while your soul is screaming no. And the cruel part is that the world doesn't punish you for being kind. It rewards you just enough to keep you trapped. You get labeled as the strong one, the reliable one, the good one. And those labels sound like compliments until you realize they come with invisible chains. Because once people learn you'll always understand, they stop trying to deserve it. That's how good people get destroyed. Not by one big betrayal, but by 1,000 small ones that go unnoticed. A forgotten thank you, a promise broken softly, a conversation that leaves you feeling smaller each time. You tell yourself it's fine, it's not a big deal, they didn't mean it. But deep down, every small dismissal chips away at your self-worth. At some point, kindness stops being a choice and becomes a survival strategy. You start believing that if you're nice enough, patient enough, forgiving enough, you'll finally be loved the way you deserve. But that belief is a trap. Because love built on exhaustion isn't love, it's dependency. And the more you give from emptiness, the more people expect it as normal. No one teaches good people how to stop giving. No one tells them that empathy without boundaries is self destruction. We're taught that being good means absorbing everyone else's pain. But here's the truth: compassion doesn't mean carrying what isn't yours. When your heart becomes a shelter for everyone, you forget that shelters aren't meant to be homes. They're meant for rest, not residence. Yet some people will move into your kindness like it's free rent, and you'll call it love. You'll say things like, "they just need time," or "they don't mean to hurt me." But meaning doesn't erase impact. Intentions don't heal exhaustion, and love shouldn't feel like debt. People think that good souls burn out because they're too emotional, but that's not it. They burn out because they spend years trying to love people who use their light as a mirror, people who only come close enough to feel better about themselves and then disappear when it's time to give back. And the saddest part? Good people don't get angry at first. They get quieter. They smile smaller. They text less. They shrink politely. They keep trying to be the bigger person until being bigger just means carrying more pain. If you're one of those people, you've probably been told you're too nice. But too nice isn't a flaw. It's a wound that's learned how to look polite. It's what happens when your self-worth was built on harmony instead of honesty. When peace meant keeping everyone else comfortable while you disappeared. You learn to confuse kindness with safety. You believe that if you keep everyone happy, no one will leave. That if you keep giving, eventually someone will see how tired you are and finally take care of you. But the truth is, they rarely do. Because people treat you the way you teach them to treat you. If you never show them where your limits are, they'll assume you don't have any. The world doesn't change when you're kind. It changes when you're kind and clear. Kindness without clarity isn't kindness, it's appeasement. It feeds dysfunction instead of transforming it. You think you're protecting others from pain, but really you're protecting them from accountability. And the irony is that eventually even your kindness starts to feel fake. Not because it is, but because it's forced. You smile through resentment, you say yes through exhaustion, and your own compassion starts to taste bitter. That bitterness is the soul's way of saying, "You've been giving too long without being seen." It's not that you've lost your goodness, it's that you've spent it all on the wrong places. There comes a point when even the kindest hearts must admit, not everyone deserves access to them. Not every problem is yours to fix. Not every apology needs to be accepted. You can be good and still walk away. You can be kind and still say no. And that doesn't make you selfish, it makes you sane. Because when your empathy destroys your peace, it's no longer empathy and it's self neglect. And the longer you practice it, the more you disappear behind your own good intentions. But here's the thing most good people eventually learn: the breaking point isn't the end, it's the beginning. The moment you finally collapse, the moment you stop pretending you're fine, something miraculous happens. You meet yourself. Not the version of you that everyone expects, but the one you buried beneath "I'm okay." That's the real you. Raw, quiet, tired, honest. The one who's been whispering for years, "Please let me rest." The one who never needed to be perfect to be loved. You realize that the people who truly value you never demanded your exhaustion as proof of your loyalty. That real love doesn't come with conditions or emotional receipts. It doesn't take more than it gives. It doesn't require you to suffer first to be seen. And in that realization, kindness begins to transform. It's no longer a transaction, it becomes truth. You stop giving to be accepted. You start giving because it's who you are, and because you know when to stop. That's the moment your kindness becomes powerful again, because it's no longer afraid. It's not begging for approval or trying to fix what's broken. It's rooted. It knows its own worth. It chooses where to shine and where not to. And maybe that's what being good was always supposed to mean: not being endlessly available, not being endlessly forgiving, but being endlessly human, aware, compassionate, but no longer blind to your own needs. Because true kindness doesn't destroy you, it heals everything it touches, including yourself. Sometimes the worst thing about being a good person isn't that people take advantage of you, it's that you see it happening and still can't stop yourself. Because kindness, when deeply rooted, doesn't know how to turn itself off. You tell yourself that maybe if you're just a little more patient, a little more forgiving, they'll finally change. You see the potential in people, and that potential becomes your prison. You fall in love not with who they are, but with who they could be if only they healed. And in trying to help them heal, you forget to protect yourself. That's the trap of empathy. It makes you see everyone else's pain more clearly than your own. You understand their trauma, their reasons, their history. You explain their cruelty to yourself with compassion. And little by little, you end up building a story where their suffering justifies your suffering. But that's not compassion. That's self abandonment disguised as virtue. Because real compassion has boundaries. Real empathy doesn't ignore reality. And real love doesn't require you to disappear. The world teaches us to admire selflessness, but no one warns us that selflessness can become self-erasure. When you always put others first, you teach them that you come second. And the more you give, the more invisible you become. There's a quiet manipulation that thrives on good people. It doesn't shout, it doesn't threaten, it just smiles and takes. It says you're such a kind soul, while slowly draining your energy. It praises your empathy so you won't notice it's being used against you. Because what manipulative people fear most is not cruelty, it's boundaries. They don't target you because you're weak. They target you because you're strong in a way they can exploit. Your patience gives them time. Your forgiveness gives them safety. Your understanding gives them freedom from consequence. And every time you overlook something, you teach them what you'll tolerate next. At first, it feels like love. You tell yourself that being understanding makes you wise, evolved, mature. You feel noble in your pain, as if enduring it somehow proves the depth of your character. But that's how manipulation works. It disguises dependency as devotion. They make you believe that your kindness is what keeps the relationship alive. They'll say things like, "You're the only one who understands me." It sounds flattering, but it's actually isolating. It traps you in the role of their savior, a role you never agreed to play, but feel guilty abandoning. And here's the part that's hardest to admit. Sometimes being the good one becomes part of your identity. You start taking pride in your endurance. You confuse self destruction with depth. You say, "I just love deeply," when what you really mean is, "I don't know how to stop." That's the hidden addiction of kindness, the need to be needed. It feels like purpose, but it's really control. You think you're saving them, but deep down, you're saving yourself from feeling useless. That's what Carl Jung meant by beware of unearned wisdom. When you think you understand everyone's wounds, you start believing you can fix them, even when they don't want to be fixed. You assume responsibility for other people's pain. And in doing so, you carry a weight that was never yours. But here's the truth: not everyone who's broken wants to heal. Some people just want company in their chaos. They don't want your light. They just don't want to sit in the dark alone. And when you finally realize that, it hurts in a way words can't describe. Because the hardest lesson for a kind heart is this: you can love someone deeply and still be bad for each other. You can see their good side and still need to walk away. You can forgive someone and still never speak to them again. Forgiveness doesn't mean access. Empathy doesn't mean endurance. And love doesn't mean suffering quietly. The people who truly value your kindness won't make you earn their respect by breaking yourself. They won't need you to shrink so they can feel big. They won't punish you for saying no. And when you finally start setting boundaries, you'll notice something. The wrong people will call you selfish. The right ones will call you healthy. Because people who benefit from your lack of boundaries will always see your self-respect as rebellion. They'll guilt trip you, call you cold, accuse you of changing. They'll tell you you've become different. And they're right. You have. You've stopped being easy to manipulate. The moment you start valuing your peace over approval, you become unrecognizable to people who only loved your compliance. But don't let that scare you, let it liberate you. Because the world doesn't need more nice people. It needs kind people who are strong enough to say no. People who can give without losing themselves. People whose compassion has structure. When you start protecting your energy, you'll realize how much of your kindness was going to people who didn't deserve it. You'll look back and wonder why you ever thought you had to explain your boundaries. You'll remember every moment you felt guilty for choosing yourself, and you'll see how unnecessary that guilt really was. You'll learn that you can say no gently and still be good. You'll learn that silence can be kinder than another forced conversation, and you'll learn that peace doesn't need witnesses. That's the real transformation. When your kindness stops being about who you want to prove you are and starts being about what feels right for your soul. True kindness doesn't chase, doesn't plead, doesn't overextend. It doesn't keep giving where there's no reciprocity. It knows that love without respect is just self-sacrifice dressed up as virtue. And slowly, day by day, you start building a new version of yourself. One that gives freely but wisely. One that knows how to care without carrying. One that finally understands that protecting your heart isn't cruelty, it's maturity. You'll find that your energy begins to change. The people who once drained you will fade away, and in their place you'll start attracting others who see your kindness not as a resource to use, but as something sacred to respect. You'll notice conversations that don't leave you tired, friendships that feel mutual, love that feels calm. And for the first time in your life, you'll realize that kindness doesn't have to hurt. It can simply be. That's when you know you've truly healed, when your heart is still open, but your door finally has a lock. There comes a point when you finally get tired of your own patterns. You wake up one morning and something inside just says, enough. Not in anger, not in drama, just quiet exhaustion. You've given, explained, forgiven, tolerated, and all it left you with was emptiness disguised as peace. And for the first time, you don't want to fix anyone. You don't want to prove your goodness. You just want stillness, to breathe without guilt, to exist without performing. That's where healing really begins. Not in a moment of revelation, but in a long, slow return to yourself. The same self you left behind while chasing everyone else's happiness. At first it feels strange. You sit in silence and it feels heavy. You say no and your body tenses, waiting for punishment. You rest and guilt whispers that you should be doing more, because kindness for so long was your language, and boundaries sound foreign in your mouth. But you keep practicing. You learn that no isn't cruelty, it's clarity. You start to understand that saving everyone was never your responsibility. You see that every time you rescued someone from the consequences of their actions, you also robbed them of the chance to grow. And slowly, your compassion matures. It stops rushing to fix and starts choosing when to care. It becomes wise. You realize that not every apology deserves another chance, that forgiveness can be silent and distant, that you can release people without inviting them back. Forgiveness is freedom, not reunion. For the first time, you stop romanticizing suffering. You stop believing that love must hurt to be real. You stop confusing endurance with depth, because love that destroys you isn't love, it's control. You begin to measure relationships differently now, not by how much passion they have, but by how safe they feel. Not by how dramatic the connection is, but by how peaceful it remains when nothing's happening. And that peace, it's addictive in its own quiet way. It doesn't rush, it doesn't demand, it just is. It gives you space to breathe, to think, to be. You start discovering new versions of kindness, the kind that isn't rooted in fear. Kindness that doesn't come from needing to be liked, but from being grounded. The kind that can say, I love you, but I also love myself. When you finally understand that self-respect is the foundation of compassion, everything changes. Because self-respect doesn't make you selfish. It makes your love sustainable. It ensures your kindness doesn't come at the cost of your sanity. The truth is, you can't pour from an empty cup, but you can teach yourself to refill it. You refill it by resting, by saying no without explanation, by giving without expectation, by trusting that the right people won't need to be convinced of your worth. There will still be moments when your old patterns knock on the door, when guilt whispers that you're being too cold, when someone accuses you of changing, and in those moments you'll smile. Because yes, you have changed. You've grown. You're no longer available for relationships that depend on your silence. That's the quiet revolution of every healed empath. They stop begging for reciprocity and start embodying self-respect. You begin to notice beauty in ordinary things again, not the kind that takes your breath away, but the kind that gives it back. A slow sunrise, a long drive without rushing, a conversation that doesn't leave you analyzing every word. That's the universe rewarding you for choosing peace over chaos. And something else happens too. Your presence changes. People feel it. You no longer chase, you attract. You no longer explain, you express. You no longer try to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding you. The people who once manipulated you will find no handle to grab. The people who once drained you will lose their power because your kindness no longer leaks. It shines. It's contained, intentional, calm. You'll notice that you start inspiring others without even meaning to. They'll look at you and think, how did they become so peaceful? But what they don't see are the nights you cried, the moments you doubted, the boundaries that cost you people you loved. They only see the aftermath, the grace that comes from surviving yourself. And that's the real miracle. Kindness that has been through hell and still believes in good. Because let's be honest, after being destroyed for it, choosing to stay kind is an act of rebellion. To keep your heart open after betrayal, to still wish others well after being used. That's not weakness. That's divine resilience. You no longer love to be loved back. You love because it's your nature, but this time you love with awareness. You give with wisdom. You forgive without losing your standards. There's a quote that says, "The softest hearts often hide the sharpest minds." That's you now. Gentle but grounded. Kind but conscious. You don't let everyone in, but when you do, you love deeply and deliberately. This kind of kindness doesn't destroy. It transforms. It walks away when disrespected. It holds space for others without losing its shape. It knows that saying "I can't" is sometimes the most loving thing you can do. Because the truth is, kindness without strength is just compliance, and strength without kindness is cruelty. But when the two coexist, that's power. Real power isn't domination or control. It's the ability to stay open in a world that tried to close you, to choose empathy when it would be easier to be bitter, to understand your worth so deeply that you no longer fear losing people who can't meet it. The more you live this way, the more your world changes. The right people appear, the ones who match your peace. They don't drain, they pour, they don't demand, they appreciate, and with them, kindness feels effortless again. You'll find that you laugh more, that you cry less, that your body feels lighter because it no longer carries everyone else's emotions. You'll stop explaining your choices because you finally understand inner peace doesn't need permission. And one day you'll look back at the person you used to be, the one who said yes to everything, who apologized for existing, who thought love had to be earned, and you'll feel nothing but compassion, because they were doing the best they could with the tools they had. They were trying to survive in a world that confused empathy with obedience. They were brave in their own way, but you're different now. You're softer and stronger all at once. You've learned that being kind doesn't mean being quiet, that gentleness doesn't mean surrender, that love, when healthy, doesn't erase you, it amplifies you. And maybe that's what life has been trying to teach you all along, that the goal was never to stop being good. It was to stop being good at your own expense, to stop proving your worth through pain, to stop mistaking tolerance for love. Now, when someone asks what kind of person you are, you won't say nice, you'll say honest, because honesty is the highest form of kindness. It says, I love you enough to tell the truth even if it disappoints you. And it says to yourself, I love me enough to honor what I feel, even if no one else understands it. That's not the end of your kindness. That's the beginning of your authenticity. And authenticity, once found, never goes back to pretending. You will still have empathy, but it won't be naive. You will still forgive, but you'll remember the lesson. You will still give, but not to everyone who asks, only to those who value it. This is how good people rise, not by becoming harder, but by becoming clearer, by realizing that kindness without wisdom destroys you, but kindness with wisdom rebuilds the world. And when you finally stand in that balance, when your heart and boundaries coexist, you'll understand something profound. The world didn't break you to punish you, it broke you to show you how unbreakable you really are. There comes a moment after everything, after the silence, the loss, the rebuilding, when you realize you've changed in ways that can't be undone. Not hardened, not bitter, just different. You move slower now, you speak less, but what you say carries more weight. You don't chase the same things anymore. You don't rush to fix every wound you see. You've learned that love doesn't mean interference, and peace doesn't need to be loud to be real. There's a kind of maturity that only pain can teach, not the kind you show off, but the kind that settles quietly in your bones. It teaches you to pause before reacting, to breathe before rescuing, to feel before deciding. It teaches you that not everything deserves your energy, and not everyone deserves your softness. You used to think that kindness meant always being available, that to care deeply was to carry everyone else's emotions until they felt better. You thought being selfless made you pure, but now you know better. You understand that constantly bleeding for others doesn't make you holy, it just makes you empty. You start to see kindness differently now. It's no longer an endless giving, it's a presence, a warmth that doesn't demand anything in return. It's the way you speak gently even when you're firm, the way you walk away without resentment, the way you hold space for others without losing your own. You begin to realize that your kindness is not for everyone, and that's not selfish, it's sacred. Not everyone can handle a gentle heart. Some people only understand love through struggle. Some people see softness as an opportunity to take, and for a long time you blamed yourself for that. You thought if you were just better, kinder, more patient, they would finally understand your love. But now you know. Their inability to value you was never your failure. It was their limitation. There's a strange peace in accepting that. You stop taking everything personally. You stop rehearsing conversations in your head. Stop trying to explain yourself to people who were never really listening. You stop overgiving as a form of hope. You realize that you can't make someone see your worth if they're committed to blindness. And yet, even after all this, you don't become cold. That's the real miracle. The world tried to turn you cynical, but it failed. You still love, just differently. You still care, but carefully. You still give, but now it's by choice, not by compulsion. You start choosing where your light goes. And that choice, that's power, because the moment your kindness becomes intentional, it stops being a weakness. You notice now that the people who stay in your life feel different. They don't pull, they don't drain, they don't make you question your worth. They bring calm, not chaos. They meet you where you are, not where it's convenient for them. And being around them doesn't require effort. It feels like breathing. That's the difference between love and attachment. Attachment says, don't leave me. Love says, I want you to be free, even if that freedom takes you away from me. You used to call it loyalty when you stayed through pain. Now you call it what it was, fear. Fear of being alone, fear of being forgotten, fear of being unloved. But you've sat with those fears long enough now to see that none of them were ever true. You were never unlovable. You were just surrounded by people who didn't know how to love. And that realization changes everything. Because once you know your worth, you stop negotiating it. You stop over explaining your boundaries. You stop chasing clarity from those who thrive in confusion. You start walking away not out of pride, but out of peace. Sometimes people ask, how do you stay kind after being hurt so much? And you smile because you know the answer now. You don't stay kind for them, you stay kind for yourself. Because that's who you are. You've already lived the version of life where pain dictated your behavior. You've already tried becoming cold to protect yourself. And you learned that closing your heart doesn't stop the hurt, it just stops the healing. So now your kindness has boundaries, but your heart is still open. You forgive, but you don't forget what you deserve. You help, but only when it doesn't cost you your peace. You give, but from overflow, not from scarcity. You love, but with eyes open this time. You start realizing that real kindness is honest. It tells the truth even when it trembles. It says no without guilt. It doesn't bend just to avoid being misunderstood. It doesn't need applause. It's quiet, steady, unshakable, the kind of kindness that comes from knowing your own value. And once you reach this place, something shifts in how you see others too. You begin to understand that everyone's fighting their own invisible battle, even the ones who hurt you. They were operating from fear, from lack, from pain they didn't know how to handle. That doesn't excuse what they did, but it helps you let go of carrying it. Because holding on to anger doesn't protect you, it anchors you. Forgiveness, you realize, isn't for them, it's the key that unlocks your freedom. You learn that you can love someone and still leave them behind. You can wish them healing and still never look back. You can remember them fondly without wanting them again. That's the highest form of love, the kind that doesn't need to possess what it appreciates. And that's what your kindness has become now. Not a habit, but a philosophy. It's not about being agreeable, it's about being aligned. You no longer choose peace to avoid conflict. You choose peace because chaos no longer feels like home. It's strange. The things that once consumed you barely touch you now. You no longer respond to every misunderstanding. You no longer rush to explain yourself to every critic. You no longer need to prove you're good, because you finally know goodness doesn't need witnesses. The world doesn't always reward that kind of growth. It often mistakes your calm for detachment, your silence for arrogance, your boundaries for cruelty. But you've learned that other people's discomfort with your growth is not your burden to carry. You're not responsible for the stories they tell about your peace. So you keep walking, softer, wiser, clearer. And along the way, something beautiful happens. You begin to see other good people waking up too. People who used to break the same way you did. You see them setting boundaries, rediscovering joy, forgiving themselves for caring too much. And it hits you. Maybe your survival was never just about you. Maybe your healing is what gives others permission to start theirs. Because kindness, when it's conscious, is contagious. It ripples quietly through every person you meet. It softens the world without you even trying. You start to see how powerful that really is, how choosing to stay gentle in a world that profits from anger is an act of rebellion. You realize that kindness isn't the opposite of strength. It is strength, expressed in its most graceful form. And one day, maybe when you least expect it, you'll feel it. That lightness again. That simple, unexplainable peace. The kind that doesn't come from someone else's approval or presence. The kind that comes from knowing you finally made peace with yourself. You'll wake up, open your eyes, and realize there's no weight on your chest anymore. No resentment, no overthinking, just breath, just life. And you'll smile, not because everything's perfect, but because you are no longer at war with your own nature. You didn't become less kind, you became true. And in a world obsessed with taking, that's the most powerful thing you could ever become. This was Mind After Life. If this story found you in a moment where you were tired of being the good one, I hope it reminded you that your kindness was never the problem, only the places you placed it. Keep being kind, but protect it. Feed it peace, not guilt. And remember, being good doesn't mean being available. It means being real. Until next time, take care of your mind and take care of your heart, because they are both sacred.